All right, ready to dive into something pretty interesting.
Always.
Okay, good. Today, we're going to be looking at choice and preference.
Oh, that's a good one.
It's something that on the surface you think, oh, this will be simple. But it's actually a very complex topic.
Yeah.
So we've got excerpts from a behavior analysis textbook chapter to help us with this.
Sounds good.
So we're going to be talking about things like pigeons pecking for treats.
Right.
All the way up to, like, how do you decide between sleeping in or going to the gym?
Yeah.
So I think this will be a good one. When we're talking about choice and preference from a behavior analytic perspective, how is that different from maybe just like a layperson's definition of those?
We don't really rely on what people say their preferences are.
Okay.
We actually look at how they behave.
So actions speak louder than words.
Exactly.
Oh.
So instead of asking someone, do you prefer apples or oranges, we look at if they have the choice, which one do they pick up and eat?
Gotcha. So like instead of asking me, do I prefer to work out or watch TV? I mean, you can probably guess just by looking at my physique which one I prefer.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, that makes sense.
And we'd also look at like over time.
Oh, interesting.
Do they consistently choose the apple or do they switch back and forth?
So it's not just a one-time choice. It's about like a pattern.
Exactly.
Okay, that makes sense. So then how do they actually go about studying this in the lab? Like, how can you set up a research study to actually look at these concepts?
Yeah, so they usually do this through what are called concurrent schedules of reinforcement.
Okay.
And so you can imagine a pigeon in a chamber with two levers.
Okay, this is like what I picture when I picture like a stereotypical research study.
Exactly.
Pigeons' levers are pecking away.
Yeah.
Right.
And each lever gives the pigeon food,
Okay.
but on a different schedule.
Okay.
So it might be that one lever gives food every 10 pecks,
Okay.
while the other one gives food every 30 seconds.
Gotcha. So there's different kind of reward systems in place.
Exactly.
Okay, I'm following you.
And this forces the pigeon to make a choice.
Okay.
You know, where should I put my effort?
Right, because if he only goes to the one where he's got to peck 10 times,
Yeah.
but there's another one he can just go to after 30 seconds,
No.
then he's got to choose which one's better for him at that time.
Exactly. Yeah. And they usually, I mean, researchers are always trying to refine their methods, right? And what they found is they like to use these interval schedules
Okay.
where a reward becomes available after a certain amount of time has passed
Gotcha.
because it keeps those options open and encourages the pigeon to continue to choose.
Okay, so if he got the reward every single time you peck the lever,
Right.
he's just going to stand there all day pecking the lever.
Right.
But if there's a 30-second delay, he's like, oh, well, I might as well go over here and try this one while I'm waiting for that one to reset.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, so that's pretty smart. But wouldn't they then just like go back and forth constantly just hoping to like hit the jackpot on each side?
Yeah. And that's where they've added in this other piece, which is called the changeover delay.
Okay.
And so what that is it's a short pause that happens after the pigeon switches from one lever to the other
Okay.
to prevent just that random flipping back and forth.
Okay, so it's almost like a think it over period.
Exactly.
Okay, I like that. And so once they've got this whole setup in place, what can we actually learn by watching these pigeons peck away at these levers?
Yeah. So what's really cool is that researchers have found that pigeons are actually pretty predictable.
Okay.
And so there's this pattern that's called the matching relation.
Okay.
And so what that means is that the proportion of times a pigeon chooses a particular lever matches the proportion of rewards that they get from that lever.
Whoa.
So if lever A delivers 70% of the total food, the pigeon will spend about 70% of its time pecking at that lever.
It's like they're doing math.
I know.
They're like, okay, well, this lever's giving me 70%. This one's giving me 30. 70's a bigger number. I'm going to spend more time on that one. That's wild.
I know. It is pretty cool.
So they're not just randomly going back and forth. They're actually like figuring out the odds and maximizing their gains.
Exactly.
That's fascinating. But that's just pigeons, right? Like, surely humans are a little more complex than that.
Yeah. But actually, this same pattern has been observed across a lot of different species.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
So from rats to cows and even humans.
Get out of here.
Yeah.
Okay, so give me some examples of how we see this in humans.
Yeah, so we can see it in how people allocate their time in conversations.
Oh, interesting.
The activities that they choose in a classroom.
Okay.
And even like players in a basketball game.
Really?
Yeah, like how they distribute their effort.
That is wild.
Yeah, it's this like really cool underlying principle that seems to govern how we distribute our behavior based on the rewards that we get.
So if we can figure out, like, the reward structure of a situation, we can actually start to predict how people are going to behave.
Exactly, yeah.
That's pretty powerful stuff.
Yeah, I mean, that's why this research is so important in applied behavior analysis, because it can actually help us to change behavior
Oh, I see.
by, like, changing the environment
Oh, interesting.
and changing the rewards associated with those different choices.
So instead of just trying to, like, force someone to do something, if you can manipulate the environment and the reward structure, you can actually change their behavior in a more meaningful way.
Yeah, exactly.
That's really neat. So we've gone from pigeons pecking levers to, like, fundamental principles of choice that apply to humans as well.
I know, it's pretty cool.
Yeah, and I'm very curious to see how we can actually use these insights to help people make positive changes in their lives.
Yeah. So, this whole like idea of choice and rewards, it connects really well with this idea of behavioral economics.
Okay, I've heard of that. I'm kind of intrigued. I always thought economics was, like, super boring, like money and markets and stuff.
Yeah.
So how does that tie into behavior?
Yeah. So, like, one of the key concepts in economics is this idea of price.
Okay.
So, how much something costs, right?
Right.
But in behavior analysis, we think of price as a response cost.
Okay.
So, how much effort is needed to get a reward?
Okay, that makes a little more sense. So instead of, like, dollars and cents, we're talking about, like, how many times does that pigeon have to peck the lever to get that little food pellet?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, I'm with you.
And so, like, a higher response cost means a higher price.
Okay.
So if that pigeon has to peck 50 times instead of 10 times to get the same reward, it's going to be less likely to do it.
Right, because it's more work.
Exactly.
Okay, yeah, I can see that. Like, even in my own life, like, if I'm tired after work, I'm way more likely to, like, order takeout than cook a healthy meal. Because, like, cooking just seems like too much effort at that point.
Exactly. Yeah, that's a perfect example.
Okay, I like that.
And then there's another layer to this, which is this idea of substitutability.
Okay.
So in economics, substitutability is how easily one good or service can be replaced with another.
Okay.
So, like, if the price of coffee goes way up, people might start drinking more tea instead.
Right, because they're like, well, I need my caffeine fix, but I don't want to pay an arm and a leg for coffee, so I'll switch to tea.
Exactly.
Okay.
So in behavioral terms, substitutability is whether one reward can effectively replace another.
Gotcha. So how do we figure out if two things are truly substitutes for each other? Like, how would you test that?
Yeah, so they can actually test this in the lab.
Okay.
So you might give a rat a choice between two different types of treats.
Okay.
And then change the price of one of those treats.
Oh, okay.
So make it harder to get to or something.
Gotcha.
And see if the rat starts choosing the other trait more. And if they do, then those treats are probably substitutes for each other.
So it's like a taste test, but with effort involved.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. I like that. But how does all of this, like, apply to real-world problems? Like, let's talk about something like substance use.
Yeah, so this is where, like, behavioral economics can offer a really valuable perspective because it helps us to understand substance use not as a moral failing or a disease, but as a pattern of choices.
Okay.
That are influenced by these same economic forces that we've been talking about.
Okay, so you're saying that, like, drug addiction is just a matter of economics.
No, I'm not saying it's that simple.
Okay.
But it's definitely part of the picture.
Yeah.
So think about it. The rewards of drug use are often immediate and intense.
Right.
Whereas, like, the costs, like health problems or relationship issues,
right,
they're often delayed and uncertain.
Right, so it's like you get the good stuff now and you worry about the bad stuff later.
Exactly.
Okay, that makes sense.
And so when other sources of, like, positive reinforcement are scarce,
Right.
those immediate rewards can be very hard to resist.
Right, because if you don't have anything else good in your life, you're going to be more likely to cling to that thing that gives you that immediate gratification.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. I see where you're going with this.
So this is where we can start thinking about, developing more effective interventions.
Okay.
It's not just about stopping the drug use. It's about, like, how do we increase the availability and appeal of these healthy alternatives?
So it's like shifting the balance in favor of those healthier choices.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So instead of just focusing on, like, taking away the bad thing, you're also trying to add in good things to replace it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that might involve, like, helping someone learn new skills,
Okay.
build stronger relationships, or create environments that make it easier to access positive reinforcement without resorting to substances.
Okay, that's really interesting. And this is all like super relevant for like ABA professionals,
Yeah,
right? It's like
absolutely.
a whole new way of looking at behavior.
Yeah.
Speaking of relevant, there's this phenomenon called activity anorexia
Oh, yeah.
that seems to like tie into this whole idea of substitutes.
Yeah, that's a fascinating one.
Okay, can you break it down for me? Because I've like heard of it, but I don't really understand what's going on.
Yeah, so this is often seen in lab rats that are put on these restricted diets
Okay.
and given access to an activity wheel.
Okay, I've seen those before.
Yeah.
Like the little hamsters running in the wheel.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So basically what happens is the rat starts eating less and running more.
Okay.
And this cycle keeps escalating until the rat becomes really, really emaciated.
Oh, that's kind of disturbing.
Yeah.
But how does that connect back to what we've been talking about with like choice and preference?
Yeah, so if you think about it, restricting food is like drastically increasing its price.
Oh.
It takes a lot more effort to get the same amount of calories.
Okay.
And as we talked about, when the price of something goes up, we often look for substitutes.
So the running becomes the substitute for the food.
Yeah, potentially.
So it's like they're trying to compensate for the lack of food
Yeah,
by engaging in another behavior.
exactly.
Okay, that makes sense. So it's not that like the running is literally replacing the calories from the food, but maybe it's providing some other kind of reward,
Exactly.
like maybe stress reduction or something.
Yeah, or like a release of endorphins.
Okay, that makes sense.
Okay.
And so this helps explain why some rats develop this like really extreme pattern of behavior.
Yeah.
Okay, so we can see how viewing behavior through this kind of economic lens can help us understand some pretty like puzzling phenomena.
Yeah, definitely.
And it can help us come up with ways to like address them.
Exactly.
But speaking of battling temptations, let's talk about how our brains value immediate rewards,
Yeah.
which can sometimes lead us down a slippery slope.
Yeah, this tendency to favor like those immediate rewards, even if they're smaller, is called delayed discounting.
Okay.
It's like our brains have this built-in impatience factor.
Oh yeah, tell me about it. Like, I'm the queen of choosing instant gratification over delayed reward.
Right.
Like, cookie now, gym later. And let's be real, cookie usually wins.
Yeah, and there's actually like a mathematical curve that describes this.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's called the hyperbolic discounting curve.
Okay.
And it basically just shows how the value of a reward decreases the longer we have to wait for it.
Okay.
So the steeper the curve, the more impatient we are.
So if you're like a super impulsive person, you're going to have a really steep curve.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay.
But why are we wired this way?
Well, if you think about it from an evolutionary perspective,
Okay.
it makes sense to prioritize immediate needs.
Okay.
You know, like imagine you're an animal searching for food.
Okay.
Getting that food now is much more important than worrying about what you might eat a week from now.
Right, because if you're starving, a meal tomorrow is not going to help you much.
Exactly.
But then in our modern world, this can kind of backfire on us.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Because we have like temptations everywhere. And, if you're always choosing the thing that's right in front of you,
Right.
that can lead to, bad eating habits or procrastination or even financial problems.
Absolutely.
So how do we combat that? Like, what can we do to like strengthen that self-control muscle?
Well, one approach is this idea of a commitment strategy.
Charlie?
And so that's basically about making choices in advance that limit our future options
Okay.
and make it harder to give in to temptation.
Okay.
So it's like signing up for that gym membership,
Okay.
even though you might be tempted to skip those workouts later on.
It's like setting up guardrails for your future self
Exactly.
so that you can't like veer off the path too much.
Exactly.
I like that. And this all kind of ties back into that idea of preference reversals, where like what we want can change depending on how far away it is.
Exactly.
But we might be super motivated to like eat healthy and exercise when we've got a beach vacation coming up in 6 months.
Sure.
But then when there's a plate of cookies right in front of you, all of a sudden it's like, yeah, the beach can wait.
Yeah, those long-term goals kind of fade into the background.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so the commitment strategy is kind of a way to like bridge that gap
Yeah.
and make sure that like future you doesn't totally sabotage all your plans.
Exactly.
This is all like super helpful. I'm starting to see how like understanding these principles can really help us make better choices in all areas of our lives. But before we wrap up, I'm curious. We've talked a lot about how rewards influence choice, but isn't there more to it than that? What about like individual preferences, like those little
Yeah.
quirks that make each of us unique.
Yeah, you're right. It's not just about the rewards themselves.
Good.
People do have these individual preferences that can't always be explained by the objective value of the rewards. And that's where this thing called the generalized matching equation comes in.
Okay, tell me more.
So it kind of builds on the basic matching relation that we were talking about earlier.
Okay.
But it adds in some extra layers to account for individual differences.
Gotcha. Okay, break it down for me.
Okay, so imagine we've got a graph, right?
Okay.
And the x-axis shows the balance of rewards between two options.
Okay.
And the y-axis shows how much effort they put into each option.
Okay, so effort in, rewards out.
Exactly.
Okay.
And so the standard matching equation would predict a perfectly straight diagonal line.
Okay.
Meaning their effort perfectly matches that reward ratio.
Gotcha.
But the generalized matching equation adds in these two key parameters.
Okay.
Called sensitivity and bias.
Okay, I like where this is going.
So sensitivity is about how much someone's choices are influenced by even small changes in that reward balance. So a highly sensitive person will shift their behavior really quickly if one option starts paying off even slightly better.
Gotcha. So someone who's not as sensitive needs a bigger difference to switch things up.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so it's like a volume knob for how much those rewards actually matter.
Yeah.
Okay, I like that. What about bias?
So bias is about these inherent preferences that aren't directly tied to the rewards.
Okay.
So maybe someone just always prefers the right-hand option.
Okay.
Regardless of the payoff.
So they just have a favorite.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. This is making so much sense. So this generalized matching equation, it helps us understand not just the influence of rewards, but also those individual quirks and preferences
Exactly.
that make each of us unique.
Yeah.
Which I feel is incredibly valuable in a field like ABA, where you're working with people who have such a wide range of needs and preferences.
Absolutely, yeah. And it's not just a theoretical concept either.
Okay.
This equation has been used to study everything from animal foraging patterns to the effects of medications on decision making.
That's really cool.
Yeah, it's even being used to develop new interventions for people with addiction or ADHD and other challenges.
Wow, this whole deep dive has been so eye-opening. We started with pigeons pecking levers, and we ended up exploring all these intricate factors that influence our choices, from immediate rewards to our brains, unique wiring. It makes you realize that even those seemingly simple choices are actually the result of this complex interplay of forces. What stood out to you from this exploration of choice and preference? Does it change how you view your own decision-making process? Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.